So, last night, late last night, there was the mass shooting in Las Vegas. And today, my Facebook was just inundated with all of these, pray for Vegas, all these anti gun memes. Everybody's commented on it. All these celebrities have come out and commented on it. Most of them left leaning. And, they got the crocodile tears and everybody's sad. And don't get me wrong, it's a tragedy, what happened. But this artificial bubble of a world that these people live in, these anti-gun people live in, it's really starting to be irritating because I can tell that they don't listen and they don't actually draw out their own arguments. Like, draw out their own arguments to the inevitable conclusion that any logical or reasonable person would come to. They don't even know what they're talking about as it pertains to guns, what's legal, what's illegal, how you even get a gun. They talk about things, that simply aren't true. That a lot of the Democrats have pushed, in terms of just rhetoric that aren't true. And, to be quite honest, I grew up, I'm African American. I grew up, believing in, the liberal ways. And I'd say, for the most part, I'm still very much, socially liberal. And I do have my problems with, conservatives and, their idea of patriotism and, just a lot of ways in which they think, which is why you see this discrepancy between the people who get why the NFL players are protesting versus the people who don't and think it's all about disrespecting the flag. So I have my issue there. But when I listen to Democrats talk about guns and gun control and they try to politicize, every tragedy that happens, I'm listening to their arguments. I'm listening to actually what they're saying, right? Because pretty much on a lot of other subjects and things that they talk about, from a logical standpoint, from a logical argument, I can see where they're coming from and I can agree with what they're saying. But when it comes to gun control, it's like everything that comes out of their mouth is a lie. Everything that comes out of their mouth is a lie. Even understanding the purpose of the Second Amendment, is a lie, with them. The purpose of the Second Amendment was so that the government could not overpower the people. It's not about hunting. It's not about militias. It's about the people having the small arms equivalent to what the military is currently using so that they would have an effective means of fighting back. This idea that the Second Amendment was supposed to be stagnant is absurd. Because once you would have a situation where, as I said in a previous video, let's say all police officers had Iron Man suits or all military had Iron Man suits, and they decided to listen to a tyrannical president, somebody who's as insane as I believe Donald Trump to be, and listen to their commands and didn't desert and, okay, I want you to do this to the American people and I want everybody to fall in line and go out there with your Iron Man suit and do it. And all we have are combustion rifles, which are basically today's, quote unquote assault weapons, which they're not. Assault weapons are select fire. An AR-15 is not an M4 or an M16. But the anti-gunners don't care about that. Whether you can pull the trigger fast as you can or whether it's fully automatic, they don't care. They don't care. They don't like the way that the gun looks. They don't like that it's copied off of, a military style weapon, right? Which essentially all firearms are. All firearms started with their original designs being for the military. to fulfill military contracts. The government says, hey, we need a submachine gun. Okay, bam, Tommy gun. Okay, we need a handgun for our troops. Okay, bam, 1911. 1911 only holds 7 rounds. And with the advancement of technology, it can hold more rounds. But the Second Amendment was most certainly designed to be progressive, because if it wasn't designed to be progressive, then there'd be no point in the Second Amendment. We'd all be standing around with muskets while law enforcement had fully automatic or semi-automatic weapons. And how do you fight tyranny with that? And then you get the people who jump up and say that it's absurd to think that tyranny could ever happen. I just got finished watching the Ken Burns documentary about Vietnam. And I was blown away at the amount when the Pentagon Papers came out in 1971, coming from the guy named Ellsberg, who ironically, the whole, if you have to watch the Ken Burns documentary, there's one section that you should watch, and it's Section 8. Section 8 and 9. But Section 8, the parallels between what went on in the early 70s and what's going on now with the divide in the country is just insane. Even with stuff like, the patriots, who or the parents of soldiers, or the older people who were in no threat of having to go to war. It was just the younger people who were at threat of having to go to war, and the younger people were challenging the war, and they were called unpatriotic. When the people shot on the government, shot on the National Guard, shot on those students at Kent State, 81% of American people, and this is white on white, 80% of Americans thought that the students were at fault back then. And you had violent groups. You had violent groups like the Weathermen, the Tribe, and they were just going out there just tearing shit up. And that would be considered modern day Antifa. The Black Panthers actually called them anarchist, because they were just out there to tear stuff up. And there was a black woman by the name of, I believe it's Eva Jefferson, who was the president of one of these organizations at one of the schools. I believe it was Northwestern. And, she had this conversation with the president. Not the president, Nixon's vice president. And she made the point about, being violent to get things done. Not that was their goal, but it's one of the tools in their arsenal. And the vice president responded, I take issue with you saying that you need to be violent, or, you use violence to get things done. And I'm sitting there listening to it, and she didn't use the comeback, but I would have used the comeback if I was sitting there. I'm like, how dare you sit up in here and talk about violence? It doesn't get anything done, but yet you're sending troops over to Vietnam right now as we speak and having a whole bunch of Americans die for nothing. I mean, literally nothing. And so when those Pentagon Papers came out from John F. Kennedy to Lyndon B. Johnson to who was after Lyndon B. Johnson? It was John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, and there's somebody else that was in the papers, and I can't think of who it was, because it was all before Nixon. And in the papers, right? This is all based off of Secretary of Defense, I believe it is McNamara. He basically they explained all of their doubts. They knew that they couldn't win the Vietnam War in 1961. They knew that it was a pointless war, but yet they doubled down and sent countless Americans to go off and die. So it was at 1971, or in 1971, that that blind patriotism that many Americans had, where, the president doesn't lie, the president's up there with Jesus and God, all of that disappeared with the Pentagon Papers. That's when people started saying politicians are nothing but liars. That's when people started saying that. But what's funny is we've kind of gone back to these people in America that have this blind faith, right? You know, the liberals, they call themselves progressive, but it's like they trust the government for their own security. Then when we go over to the conservatives, you know, they want to act like they define patriotism. They take issue with Colin Kaepernick or black people taking a knee, you know, with the NFL and the NBA and all that. And they want to suggest that black people should trust the government that white people stockpile guns and ammunition against because of their fear of tyranny from said government. Think of the irony in that. The irony in that. You know, and you know, by the same token, you know, you have liberals who they don't trust the government when their people aren't in the government. They don't trust the government. And you could say conservatives are the same way. You know, but I'm like, it's like the only liberals who get it are what do they call themselves? The redneck, what is it called? Redneck redemption. What do they call themselves? You know, the liberals that are basically a bunch of Second Amendment people who understand how the system is screwing everybody over. And they understand how the system of white supremacy works. They understand how poor working class whites have been used to keep, you know, minorities in check, namely black people. They understand how the game is played. They understand the classism, the class stratification in America, and the smoke screens that have been presented to get people to identify with one particular side or one particular group. And I mean, just played like suckers. And that's exactly what was, you know, pointed out after the exposure of the Pentagon Papers. You know, Americans were literally pitted against each other for votes, you know, sound bites, you know, rhetoric, and, you know, people would just divide and split and go in one direction, really believing what these politicians were saying when their only goal was to get reelected. They didn't care about any of what they were actually saying. They didn't really believe it. They just said whatever was popular so that they would get reelected. And it's all there, especially in that Vietnam documentary by Ken Burns and Lynn Novak. It's an awesome documentary. But anyway, getting back to the Second Amendment stuff, like I'm listening to Jimmy Kimmel talk about you don't need an AK-47 to defend yourself. Like, number one, who are you to determine what it is that I should be able to defend myself with? A handgun is harder to shoot than an AK-47 or any long gun rifle because you can shoulder them. You can shoulder long gun rifles. Not only that, they hold more bullets. If 3 or 5 men, you know, come into my house with a knife, you know, like they did those 3 guys that went into the home in Oklahoma, I'm not trying to have a knife fight. I'm not trying to have a bat fight. I'm not trying to have a play on an even field. I'm not trying to do any of that stuff. I want the upper hand as much as I can get the upper hand. And if I have to take out all of them that are in my home that shouldn't be, you know, in the middle of the night, then that's what I'm going to do. And I have every right to do it. But that's only part of the Second Amendment. The real part of the Second Amendment, again, is against tyranny. Tyrannical governments. You know, and it blows my mind at how, especially the liberals, every time they see tyranny around the world, they're like, do something, do something, do something. Look at the Syrians. Look what's happening to them. Look at the Ukrainians. Look at the Egyptians and what Mubarak is doing to the Egyptians. Look at the Arab Spring. Look at what they're doing to people in Iran. We must do something. Look at what they're doing to the Rohingya in Myanmar. They're killing the minority Muslims and they're unarmed and unprotected. right? Look at what they're doing to the South Vietnamese. Look at what they're doing. We must go in there and save them, right? They're always saying that. And this is the problem with American exceptionalism. Because American exceptionalism has people thinking that it can't happen here. And I don't know where people get that safe notion that it can't happen here. People are savage. The savagery of Americans lies just beneath the surface. You know, it's like that YouTube video that floats around called 9 Meals Away from Anarchy. Or that movie, The Road, where there was some sort of, I don't know, some catastrophic event, whether it's an asteroid or volcanic ash, and it blotted out the sun, and then, the plants died, and then all the animals died, and then people started cannibalizing each other. Everybody plays nice when there's jobs and there's opportunities and there's plentiful food and nobody's struggling or suffering, right? Everybody plays nice. When there's plenty to go around, there's less racism, there's less hatred. Yeah, even white people are more willing to share. This is why if you go back and you listen to the 60s, the songs in the early 60s, when black of Motown and black men in Detroit, when they were working for the auto industry, all those songs are happy. What was the song? I forget what the song was called. Somebody told me the name of the song before, but I always forget it. Where he was singing about, the children are playing, the bosses are paying. That was the lyrics of the song. And the birds are chirping and something like that. I can't think of what the name of the group was, but it was a black Motown group. And, when there's plenty of jobs to go around, which there obviously were after World War II, after, the rest of the world was, trying to recover and build up their infrastructure. But in that 20-year span after 1945, everything was, if you wanted a car, it was made in America. If you wanted, something that was manufactured, it was made in America. Everything said made in the USA. And that built up America's reputation around the world. But, when stuff starts, shrinking, jobs, opportunities, people get nasty. It's one of the things one of the reasons why I think white Americans are nastier than ever today. Because they believe in the what they were entitled to. They were entitled to certain jobs always being there, despite all the, deindustrialization. Many of them ignorant, not knowing, how global economics and globalism works and why they don't have the job that their daddy had or that their grandfather had that they were able to support a family on. They don't understand that. They blame other groups and minorities and whatnot, and as opposed to focusing on the white elites that actually have the power, and that's a whole different conversation. I'm just making the point that when things get tight, people get nasty. And if you start talking about things going all the way down to, some sort of collapse, then people start killing each other. So not only would people with guns have to worry about a tyrannical government that would obviously try to come in and, despite probably creating the problem, but then selling the people the solution, right? Now we must bring in, martial law. Now we must bring in a new world order, to normalize things and bring things back to normal. They're not going to want the people who are of the old system and wanted freedom, and rights and all that other stuff. They want to be able to shred up that Bill of Rights and the Constitution like you wouldn't believe. That's the first step in a new world order, is to shred, this system that tries to bring balance between the people and the few, the elites. And that's why the Second Amendment is in there. And that's why it's the Second Amendment. Not the the 14th Amendment, not the 15th, not the 16th. It's the Second Amendment. That's how important up on the priority list it was. And to those people who, think that, oh, it's no, the Second Amendment is about militias. No, it's not about militias. It's not about militias and it's not about hunting. Yes, you need armed people to make up a militia for a free state. Yes, you need people to be able to mobilize, for a militia, right? But if it wasn't, but if the Second Amendment was just about militias, then why was the Second Amendment included in the rights that would be reinstated to freed slaves if it's the right of the militia and not the right of the people? Black people couldn't even fight alongside white people. They couldn't even be a part of a integrated militia. But yet, they were given the rights to defend themselves. They were given the rights to exercise the Second Amendment as a group of people, not as a militia. And we know this by the ways that the Ku Klux Klan, these states in the South, had black codes and Jim Crow to deny black people access to Second Amendment rights. All the laws that white men came up with. Oh, well, he has to be a good person and justifiable need and justifiable clause. And then we arbitrarily decide that we don't want to give them those weapons. That we don't want to give them those guns. Because we don't want them having it. But we can't say we don't want them having it. We just come up with some arbitrary way of just saying that they can't have it because it's for public safety. Aha, solution. That's why the irony is, the white people who are being denied their gun rights in states like New Jersey, where they use good justifiable need and good cause, because those laws were originally designed to keep guns out of the hands of black folks. It's so arbitrary that you can deny anybody the right because of those laws. So you had white folks who co-signed those laws thinking that they were only going to be used against black folks, only to come to find out 40 years later that the white elites used those same laws that were designed to deny black people their right to the Second Amendment is being used to deny them their rights to the Second Amendment. That's the irony of it. I take a slight sweet pleasure in knowing that fact and hearing white men cry about them being denied. I'm like, oh, how's it feel? Right? The other thing is, when it comes to, these people talking about, the Second Amendment and, how, it's just outdated and we need to do something to ban, all these weapons. First off, and I've said this before, the majority of homicides in America are caused by, gun violence, are caused by inner city violence associated with the narcotics trade, gang related, drug related. Mass shootings are a drop in the bucket. Most gun deaths are caused by handguns, not caused by assault rifles. But, these things are sensationalized. It's part of the reason why I think, you get these guys that go off and want to do these mass shootings in the first place, because the media makes them famous. Makes them famous. For the next month, we're going to hear about how, they need to, we're going to hear all this investigation into this person's background and their lifestyle and who they were and who they went to school with. And we're going to hear all this. Right? Their picture is going to be splashed all over the place. Their name is going to be repeated 1,000 times. If I was a suicidal loser, hell, I would want to be a mass shooter because, that's my ultimate fuck you to the world. And that's the best way for me to get some sort of recognition, to gain some sort of immortality because of the way that the media handles these mass shooters and literally immortalizes them forever in the hearts and minds of Americans. That's just my opinion on it. You know, um, I'm trying to think another point that I was going to make, and this is the biggest point. This whole notion, this whole idea that in a free society that you can stop all crime. You know, people talking about background checks, for this guy. And I'm like, he worked at Lockheed Martin. I'm sorry, but you don't work for Lockheed Martin without going through some mental health care checks or mental health checks and a background check. You cannot stop people from snapping. No more than you can stop people from, switching lanes on the highway and driving into oncoming traffic. But yet nobody's talking about we need to ban, cars. We need to deny people from having licenses, right? We don't do that with drunk drivers. A drunk driver abuses his privilege of driving. We don't say nobody else can drive because of the danger of drunk drivers. On top of the fact, we got people talking about, well, we need to give stiffer penalties for, these mass murderers. Most of the mass murderers either get killed or kill themselves. And somebody who is mentally insane because they snapped, they're not fearful of your laws. They're not fearful of death. You can't threaten them with death to make them stop. That's like trying to get make a suicide bomber scared because you created some laws. His whole mission is to die in the process, but yet, suicide bomber, we have some stiff penalties. We'll stick you in Guantanamo. I'm not going to make it to Guantanamo. I'm going to blow myself up, Allahu Akbar, before I even get to Guantanamo. That the hell you say? But this is how these people think. Oh, we need a background. A background check does not determine whether you are going to commit a crime in the future. A background check does not determine whether you're going to snap in the future. All it determines is whether you are a criminal and whether you have previously committed crimes. And certain crimes are disqualifiers for you being able to have access to that gun. Having a mental health background check does not stop a person from snapping. It doesn't. I don't understand what people don't understand about that. It doesn't stop them from snapping, from going postal. Whether somebody goes through a bad divorce, they lose their job, and they go off and, kill a bunch of people. It's unfortunate when it happens, but in a free society, it's not something that you can stop unless you want to deny everybody else access to that particular right. And then what? Then first off, you act like, number one, it's like you're bringing a civil war upon America because the people who have guns and feel strongly and passionately about the Second Amendment are not going to give it up. All those tread on me people with the flag are going to be like, come and get my guns, come and get them. If you want them, come and get them. Which is an open invitation for you to knock on the door and have a barrel sticking in your face. Most law enforcement officers in America wouldn't even attempt to do that. On top of the fact that in America, with 330 million guns, and on top of that, the people who even serve in the military who also believe in the Second Amendment, because many of them are private gun owners themselves. You join the military, you service in the military. Yeah, I want to have that gun like the one I had when I was serving. Okay? They're pro Second Amendment. So many of them are not going to go door to door to try to take anybody's guns or try to take anybody's rifle. So they're not going to give it up. On top of that, then you have the criminal elements. Criminals aren't going to give up their guns. So then what are you going to have? You're going to have a situation where we're like, what, South Africa? Right? Where you have the the other additional factor in South Africa is they still have the huge wealth gap between whites and blacks brought about by the apartheid. And so many blacks in South Africa have resorted to crime. But yet in South Africa, you can't conceal carry. Now, I'm sure if you throw a bunch of money around and, do some bribery and some corruption, then I'm sure you might be able to carry. But most of the people who have the disproportionate wealth in South Africa have security. But not everybody can afford armed security. In part, I think some of it has to do with wanting to be, the security companies wanting to be able to keep their existence and their thriving business going. So, yeah, keep the gun laws as they are so that people have to come to us for protection and hire 5 of our guys who can carry because they have a license to carry because it's a part of their job. That's like one of the ways that you can get it in South Africa. But the person actually who hires the security guards to be defended can't carry themselves. Right? I mean, I know many of you go over to Active Self-Protection and you watch the videos that he has, whether it's Brazil or whether it's South Africa, and there's constant carjackings in South Africa. Constant carjackings in South Africa. And that's what these people want to reduce it down to. Because they're not going to stop with, we want an assault weapons ban. Then it'll turn into, we want, magazine restrictions. And the next thing you know, you'll be standing around with a blow dart and some mace. This has already been done. This has been done in Chicago. This has been done in Washington, D.C. There should be no trust when it comes to the anti-gunners and sensible gun laws and reasonable gun laws and all that stuff. There should be no trust because their goal is confiscation. Their goal is to have it where nobody has guns because we just trust the government that much. Same liberals that run around screaming, the cops are racist and the cops do this and cops do that and there's too many problems with the cops in this country. All of a sudden, they trust that government arm for protection. They trust these same cops that, are killers of black people and overzealous and abusing their power. They trust them for their protection. I'm like, where do you even get off thinking that the cops are going to protect your ass after all the shit you've been talking? Now, granted, I definitely think that we have a problem in this country when it comes to, law enforcement and their interaction with black people. The original law enforcement setup was designed to be slave patrol. That's what they were. They were the slave patrol. They were the slave catchers. They were the overseers. They were members of the Ku Klux Klan. So there's a historical context as to why black people have an issue with law enforcement. Officers have never been black people's friends. Even in that Ken Burns Vietnam documentary, the situations of fragging where black soldiers were throwing grenades in their commanding officers' tents. Black people weren't the only ones doing it. There were also white people doing it. There were over 800 cases of fragging, which are troops killing their superior officers or attempting to kill their superior officers in Vietnam. There were 209 in 1970 alone. You go out there, you had these white guys, they had Confederate flags. It's all in the documentary. They had Confederate flags. And the black man's out there fighting. And they call him boy and nigger, and then doing shit like putting the black guy, you be point. Being point is the most dangerous position in Vietnam. You're the one that takes the sniper fire. You're the one that stands on the first steps on the first landmine. You're the one, that hits the first booby trap. You're the one that gets cut down by machine gun fire first. And you start doing that and, disproportionately, let the black guys go out there. Let them get chopped down. And one black guy, he dies. Another black guy, he dies. These are, four guys who live in a tent together. And, it's done to the point where there's only one black guy left. And all his boys are dead. All the soldiers that are closest to him. Yeah, he's going to fuck you up. Ain't nothing for him to... And it's so stupid. Like, how you going to be racist and you out there in Vietnam? It's nothing for... a guy with a rifle. All the black guys got rifles. They sit there and be like, oops, Sorry, right? You in the middle of a firefight, you aim right at the motherfucker that you want dead and you blow his head off. Oh, he got hit by Viet Cong. There's no forensics. It's 1968. You know? Like it was just insane, like the type of stuff that they were doing. And then again, people, want to complain about, black people, they're protesting the flag and they're being disrespectful to America and the anthem and everything. And we demand, we're going to make black people's patriotism compulsory, and they must respect the flag and they must respect America the way that we respect America, despite the fact that America has never treated them like anybody else. Don't even get me started into people not getting their medals of honor, not getting proper promotions. They all talked about this in the documentary. Guys who actually served. So even when you shed blood for America as a black person, America doesn't give a fuck. America doesn't care. And that's the ultimate, because I'm saying if you're at the point where you're shedding blood and this country won't recognize you as equal, then there's essentially nothing that you can do as a black person to make this country see you as an equal. And that's very discouraging, and that's not a good place for black people to be in mentally if they're going to stay in this country. It's not a good place for them to be. And white people, they don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. We're going to rip up our NFL tickets. We're going to, we don't want. We're going to not watch it. Fox News is not going to show the beginning of the national anthem. We're not showing the national anthem anymore on television. Bunch of crybaby shit, as opposed to, saying, hey, maybe we do have a problem. Maybe we do. Maybe this is something that should be examined, but no, not. But I'm just making the point about, now all of a sudden, there's cops around. Cops will be there in time to save you. And I'm like, to the liberals, I'm like, well, since when did cops all of a sudden become your best friend? Yesterday they was out there killing black people, right? They was putting guns in black people's faces, which they do. But, now all of a sudden, it's officer goodness. You don't need a gun because you have 911, you have your cell phone. And this is like the delusional state of mind that many of these people operate in. I'm like, look, you live in a dangerous world. Anybody at any moment can decide, like, I'm going to kill some people. Maybe I'll use a bomb. Maybe I'll drive them over with a truck like the Muslim guy did in France, in Nice. Right? He killed 100 and some odd people, just running them over with a damn semi. And you would think that people would recognize, like, damn, we live in a dangerous world. But I forget who said it. Which one of the founding fathers said it, right? If you don't, what did they say about liberty and versus safety? I don't know if it was Benjamin Franklin. I don't know who said it, but I'm sure y'all know the phrase. If you give up liberty for safety, then you deserve neither. And that's really what it is. People are literally handing in liberty for the false perception or what they perceive to be safety. And it's so far from the truth. You can go and you can ask, any South African when it comes to that, about how they feel about not being able to defend themselves. So it's like you got crime on one hand, which, I mean, that just empowers and emboldens criminals. Like, shit, let me be a criminal and know that these people don't have guns, and well, you should, he can use a bat or a sword or something like that. Well, I got 5 guys with me. If you don't think that 5 guys in their 20s can't overpower a middle-aged to elderly couple, you're out of your mind. You're out of your mind. So it's like, people have to be able to defend themselves against each other and also our tyrannical government. Now, the other thing is people also want to talk about, what's the probability of that? I don't know what the probability of that is. All I know is that human beings have a propensity for violence, and absolute power corrupts. And we can see this, based on history. This is not anything that's out of the ordinary. It's like the people that, if you try to tell people, hey, it's a potential for, guys to hijack a plane and slam it into a building. They don't have to do it any other way. They don't have to, have this, massive shootout on the White House lawn. No, fly some planes into a building. If you told people that in 2000, they would have been like, oh man, that's like a movie. They didn't believe that. But now we're sitting there with the two empty spots where the World Trade Center stood. I just don't know. When you look at history, even when you look at that Vietnam documentary, and the amount, that documentary is graphic. The type of stuff that people did to each other. Even U.S. Marines. Look at My Lai. The My Lai massacre in Pinkerville in Vietnam, where the soldiers, after losing many of their men to mines and sniper fire and everything else, they went into a village that they believed to be sympathetic to the Viet Cong and massacred nothing but women, children, and the elderly. Lined them up, brought them to the town center, and opened up on them with automatic fire. The lieutenant's name, I believe, was Calloway. And he got off. As well as everybody else got off and got pardoned. Even though that's what they did, because, in Vietnam, their whole thing was body count. It was all about the body count. Because that's how they proved, whether they were winning the war, or so they thought. Right? Because McNamara wanted to have a quantitative way of measuring success, because he was a numbers guy. So if they killed 10 of us and we killed 100 of them, that's a victory. They had this whole 10-to-1 ratio thing going on. And I like how one of the soldiers put it. He said, well, the American people, it doesn't matter about, I don't know if it was an American soldier, if it was somebody else, but they were like, they don't care about the 10 Viet Cong that are dead. They care about the 1. And I thought that was a very profound statement. When the guy made it, whoever made it during the documentary, I thought it was a very profound statement, because it's true. Just atrocities all over the world. We see the abuses of power: Russia, Ukraine, Iran, China. You see the abuses. And yet people think, oh, that can't happen here. It won't happen here. Like I had somebody, they were talking about somebody else who's Russian that we know, and they were saying, how the guy praises Putin and all this stuff, and they were talking about how, the income in Russia is like something like, I don't know what it is, like $18,000 or something like that a year. That's like what the people make. But then, like, he did some other calculation and said, well, after you compensate for such and such and such and such, it only comes out to like $8,000 US a year. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what he was saying. And he was like, well, eventually the Russians will get sick and tired of it, and they'll raise up against the Russian government. I was like, raise up against the Russian government with what? What are they going to raise up against the Russian government for? What are they going to overthrow Putin with? Are you kidding me? They don't have a Second Amendment. Not like that. Not like that. They might be able to have a pistol or two and 32 ACP or Makarov or some stupid stuff like that. But, they're not allowed to have rifles and stuff like that in Russia. Only the billionaires get to do that. Russia is the biggest mob organization that there is in the world. And I'm like, and that right there, and it was funny because we were talking, and the mass shooting was still being talked about on television. It was right in the background as I was talking to the guy. And I said, and what you just said is exactly why the Second Amendment was put in there in the first place. Because what are they gonna raise up with or challenge the government? The Russian people can't do anything. They can't do anything. Regardless of whatever Putin wants to do. They are Putin's bitch. And that's why, regardless of that mass shooting in Las Vegas, the Second Amendment should stand. Should stand. There's no, even, let's ban assault weapons. Okay, so, again, that neuters the Second Amendment and renders it ineffective. How are you going to fight tyranny when the people coming at you are coming at you with body armor and rifles versus, you just having a bunch of handguns? And I had somebody, they made the comment about, the governments, they got tanks and they got this and they got, Predator drones and they got all that stuff. First off, when it comes to tyranny, if tyranny were to happen, you would have a whole bunch of deserters. Second off, there's only 1.5 million people to 2 million people in the military, active duty. I don't even think it's breaking 1.5. I could be wrong about that number, but I'm saying it's not that many active duty people. There really isn't that many. And then with all of the cities all across America, all the people, all 330 million people, right? Minus the children and the elderly and stuff like that. So let's go with I don't know, 200 million people or maybe 180 million people of upwardly mobile adults, right, who could fight back, right? That against 1 million? Against 1 million? No, against 500,000 after you subtract all the deserters. I'm like, ain't no way. Ain't no way. That's, again, if that 180 million Americans are actually armed. Ain't no way. But if they were not armed at all, please, it would be like the Hunger Games. It would be like the Hunger Games all day. I don't understand what people don't get about this. Maybe as an African American, I think a little bit differently. Because being an African American, you start from a point of pessimism. This country wasn't for you. This country didn't have your best interest at heart. Right? This country has shitted on your people. This country has treated you as second-class citizens. So black people don't have the optimism that white people have when it comes to America. We don't. We don't. We are extremely skeptical. To my amazement, black people still run around and they're rabidly anti-Second Amendment, and it makes no fucking sense to me. I'm like, you're in the land of your former oppressor. If there's any group of people who should be staunch Second Amendment people, it's African Americans. I have no clue why it's not. Some of it, I think, has to do with the inner city violence and the drugs that the CIA dumped into the black community, right? People want to deny that, but yet they just came out with a movie with Tom Cruise in it. Him running around, running drugs for the Reagan administration. Right? What other role did Reagan play? Wasn't there another role that Reagan played before he was president? Not just being an actor. It was something else he did. Was he CIA director? I don't know. I have to look into that. But this country is not to be trusted in the eyes of black people. Black people have a love-hate relationship when it comes to America. It's not to be trusted. It just isn't. But the way that we respond, we talk a big game, we talk a lot of shit, but the way that we actually respond, to certain things that we should actually be doing, given the history and the awareness and the knowledge that we have, we act totally inappropriately, when it comes to the things that we should actually do. It's goes back to one of the videos that I did, with is tyranny for is fighting tyranny is for white people. Is just for white people. Because apparently black people, we're not allowed to fight tyranny, or only white people get to define when the green light is on when tyranny actually happens and when you actually get to fight it. But when tyranny happens to black people and black people, it's like it doesn't take a rocket scientist. It's easy to be aware of and know when you're being shitted on. If somebody kicks you in the ass, you know somebody kicked you in the ass. You don't have to have anybody broadcast or announce to you that, hey, you've been kicked in the ass. You know you've been kicked in the ass. You know when you're getting your butt kicked. Nobody has to make an announcement or tell you. But again, when it comes to black people, it's, you better not, you better not. And again, this is my problem with the NRA, and I've said this numerous times, because the NRA plays both sides of the fence. They act like they're law enforcement's best friend. They tell the white people that they need to arm themselves against a tyrannical government. White people jump up and they support law enforcement and think law enforcement is their best friends when it comes to, keeping the niggas in check and Black Lives Matter and being against the black people. But yet they completely ignore the fact that if tyranny were to happen, that law enforcement would be the spear tip of that tyranny. If they were to pop shots at anybody, if anybody was coming for their guns, it wouldn't be black people, it would be white people. Be it that 93% of all law enforcement are Caucasian. But that seems to get overlooked. And you got cops that, oh, yes, we support the NRA. Right? And then go and they tell black people, oh, you need to arm yourself and you need to defend yourself because America's racist and they denied Martin Luther King his Second Amendment. But then they go back and then they tell white people that you need to stockpile your guns and ammunition against the potential of a tyrannical government, completely ignoring the fact that police officers and people who serve in the military would be their enemy. But then they turn around and then tell black people that you need to trust and respect the very people that we're stockpiling guns and ammunition against. It's mind-blowing, isn't it? But anyway, I think that's I covered all the bases that I wanted to say in this video. So that's my video.